Your computer is doing a lot of work already.
Yeah.
Started.
Hello
It
everyone.
started.
Welcome to Global Biz Apps Day 2020, powered by D365 Champs. I'm Vivek Patil, and hope you are doing well, keeping safe. This session is presented by Mr. Simranjit Bhalla. Simranjit will be talking about Azure integration approaches with Dynamics. Simranjit, to tell about Simranjit, Simranjit is a solution architect, author, and a scrum master. Simranjit is having almost 12 plus years experience within industry, and he's working with the KPMG Australia as a solution architect. Simranjit also holds expertise on Power Apps, CDS, Power Automate, and Dynamics 365. He has very good technical expertise with him. Before I hand over this session to Simranjit, I would like to mention that if you have any questions or queries, feel free to drop it in the chat window and we'll take it either during the session if possible or during the QA time. Thank you again for joining the Global Biz Apps Day. Enjoy the session. Simranjit, you can please share your screen.
And just to take that up, and we can let every organizer share their name. Simranjit has been kind enough to give us that 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So
Go for it.
thank
Go
you,
for it.
Simranjit. So your names are appearing, but you can just say a hi to the entire community today, guys, right? So starting with Vivek has already done that. Prashant, you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Prashant. I'm joining you from Brisbane, Australia. Thank you so much for being so supportive and being a part of this event. We really appreciate it. To Kuldeep.
Thank you, Prashant. That was really short. Well, yes, I again thank all. It's really challenging these days, but really encouraging as well to get up to this level of event. And this is one of the biggest event that is happening via D365 Champs, and I'm proud to be associated as an organizer with that. So looking forward for some great sessions throughout the day. Over to the next.
Over to Ankush.
Hi, my name is Ankush. I am currently working with IBM as a functional consultant. I have got almost 10 years of experience and looking forward for the great day. Excited.
Thank you, Ankush. Over to Preeti.
Hi, I'm Preeti Pipalia joining from Ahmedabad. I carry an experience of around 7 years in Dynamics technology, and I'm looking forward to the lot of community things happening around. Thanks.
Thank you, Preeti. Over to Nishita.
Hi everyone, I am Nishita. I have around 2 years of work experience. I'm glad I started my career with Power Platform. And at the beginning of my career, I have great exposure to a community like this. So I'm actually excited to be a part of this event and hopefully many more to come.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Shalini, Roma, and Swaroop. I'm not seeing you, Venkat, and Sagar or Golaknath. If you are there, I'm not seeing you yet on my team screen. So if you're there, please feel free to connect in and introduce yourself.
Hi. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, this is Sagar Rupani. I'm working as a Dynamics 365 and Power Platform consultant, and this is my first time that I got a chance to, participate as an organizer in this such a beautiful event. So I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying and looking forward that you guys will enjoy each and every session of this particular event. Thank you.
Great. Hi, I'm Shalini Goyal. I have just started with my career. I've been like in our platform for 2.5 years, and I'm really excited that I've been a part of this community. And let's hope today's session goes like great sessions are on the line. So yeah, we are waiting for all the sessions. Thank you.
Hello all, my name is Swaroop Deshmukh. I am joining from Seattle, Washington. I work for Adisys Corporation as a technical Dynamics CRM consultant and Power Apps consultant. Thank you for joining our event today, and we hope you join us for all the remaining sessions. And please take a look at Quizzy. We built that bot for you to have a good interaction during these live sessions. Please take a look at it and please let us know your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Venkat Subbarao Poliseti, and I am from Hyderabad working with Accenture, and this is a great day for BizApps. So I request all the people to use this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Venkata. I think the only one who's missing is, let me talk about Roma. Roma has been the power of the social media for Champs, not only this event, for as long as close to a year. And her speed is flash speed and really inspirational even for Power Automate, I'll say, to be very honest. She's not here because she has been doing some social media work for us entire night. So that's Roma Gupta from South Africa. She's another community lead for us. And Golaknath, if you are there around.
Yeah. Hi everyone. This is Goloknath working for Hitachi as SME for Dynamics 365, and I'm from Singapore. Hope we will have a great session today. That's all from my end.
Thank you to all the wonderful organizing team of this event, Global BizApp Day, GBAD, and thank you, Simaranjit, for being kind enough. We can now all turn off our cam except for the two people who will be managing the Simaranjit session. And over to you guys now, Vivek and the moderator along with Simranjit. Sorry, Simranjit, for taking over your time a bit today.
No worries. In fact, before I would like to start the session, I think you guys have been doing a very good job. So it really takes something to organize such an event online also, and you guys have been really proactive in the group also, Kaiserla group, and just managing everything by yourself. It's really challenging, and yeah, nice one. Well done.
Thanks a
Uh,
lot, Simranjit.
yeah. Just to give a background about myself. Can you guys hear me and see my desktop?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
we can
Simranjit.
hear you.
Yeah, thanks for confirming. Myself, Simran, I am working as a solution architect in KPMG Australia, Sydney. I have total of 12 years of experience and have worked in different geographies. Before that, I was working in Ireland, Dublin. And my just to give a background about my hobbies, I like watching science fiction movies, playing cricket, football, reading books, and apart from that, I've also written a book in programming in C Sharp. Yeah, that's basically about myself. And just to give you a heads up, I have a small daughter, so she tries to, disturb me every time when I'm sitting in some room. So she must be wondering somewhere what hearing my voice. So if she barges in, just give me a minute. I will mute myself before I try to,
That's that's absolutely okay, Simranjit. We are all understanding that we connect from home and remote at this point. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's totally okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, one of the challenges working from due to COVID. Just to give a background and the agenda for this session. In this session, we will basically consider why do we need to move integration out of Dynamics 365. I'm not going to move into a direction that we should consider code first approach. It should always be a configuration first approach and designer first approach, which is provided in Power Automate. But it's just some consideration in terms of why should we consider moving some things out of Dynamics to increase the performance or increase the efficiency of the operation, and what are the different factors that we should think when we are designing that integration approach. Apart from that, we will also look at a few solution patterns or design patterns that we could, use for those integration frameworks. And we will also do a high level overview on different approaches that we could use as part of that integration, which would involve Azure Aware plugins, Power Automate, Azure Functions, and Logic Apps. So if there are any questions, just feel free to interrupt me in between. We can take questions at the end also, or we can just interrupt in me in between, and we can take the questions there also. So the first point is why outsource. So we know Dynamics scales up by itself. It's and the way we write our code, we try to optimize in such a way that more complexity is on the server side because we know Dynamics has a capability of scaling up to handle any complex operations. However, there are certain scenarios, where we do need to consider the threshold or the boundaries on which we can, put any operation on the server side. We all know that we have a 2 minute timeout window in Dynamics, after which any operation, any server side code that we are writing in terms of plugins or workflows, they basically time out and we can't do much about it. Apart from that, they also consume memory. So if there are certain operations which are, happening a lot, or they are consuming a lot of memory, or they are doing some complex operations like making calls external to Dynamics, it's pretty there are certain chances that the 2 minute timeout will be expired there. So this is one particular scenario why we should consider moving operations outside of Dynamics. Uh, Second point is hiding complexities outside the collar. So we know people can always make use of Dynamics REST APIs for executing any CRUD operations into Dynamics. However, we all know that Dynamics has got some internal complexities in terms of how the data model is laid out. We could have different entities who are linking to each other. And if we are adding any or updating any entity record in Dynamics, we may need to, do some related calls in regards to it. Let's take a simple example where we are updating a bank transaction or creating a bank transaction in Dynamics. So when we are doing it, we need to make a sequence of calls. We firstly need to verify the person is a very has got a verified account in the system. We need to verify that the person has got appropriate balance, and we need to verify that we need to that the transaction will not, result in a negative balance or result in a minimum balance. So these are the these are, you can say, actions or steps that must be executed in a chronological order to maintain the sanity of the data. So because of this might, put a lot of complexity on the caller side because they may not know what are the complexities inside the dynamic system. So if we have an integration layer which can basically hide that complexity, uh, that could, help the person to manage those integrations better. Moving ahead, there are certain operations where we need to, make external calls. For example, you might need to make a call to stored procedure. We might need to make a call to access the file system, or we might need to make a call to let's say talk to SharePoint, those kind of things. So in some of those things, we might need to involve assemblies which are outside the XRM SDK. So initially, before that, we used to take help of IL merge because with IL merge, you can actually combine assemblies into one single assembly, and then, update that into Dynamics. But now in Dynamics, IL merge is no longer supported. It's deprecated now. So because of which, it's imperative that we try to, put as much simple code on the Dynamics, which is very supported and is in the framework of XRM SDK, and handle any logic outside that framework externally. So this is the third reason why we might need to think about moving operations outside of Dynamics. And any questions till now before I move ahead?
No questions as of now.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So the next point is what are the different factors which we need to consider when we are designing our integration mode? So when we talk about integration mode, we talk about different things. One approach, we can have the Power Automate, the flows. Flows have got inbuilt connectors which can allow us to connect to a various systems and integrate data. We could have logic apps which are built on a similar designer based framework, but they are more complex in terms of the system they can connect to. Or we have Azure functions, which basically are the server side webhooks, on which we can write our own code in terms of any programming language, which could be C Sharp or Python, and then upload that into cloud, or it could be CRM plugins also. So what are the factors, or what are the different things we should consider when we are zeroing down on one of that approach? So the one factor that we must consider there is, who is the initiator? Is Dynamics is the initiator, or Dynamics is the consumer? Because this is the main point, where we need to set up our integration layer. If you're not having much clarity around it, it becomes difficult. The second point is, how much volume metrics of the operation are we looking at? So when I'm mentioning this point, I'm trying to convey that idea that Power Automate is always a preferred option. However, there are certain things when the volume matrix is very large, you're looking at a large chunk of operations, and you are looking at a very complex set of operations which involves integrating with different systems. So this is one operation where the complexity is very huge. So you should always consider that factor when designing the integration layer. The third point, and somewhat it's related to, is what is the potential frequency of the operation we are looking at? Is the operation happening in chunks? Is it happening on a schedule basis? Is it happening periodically? What's the frequency of the operation we are looking at? And the last point is, are there any burst of operations or significant chunk of operations that are happening? Do we need, what I'm trying to convey in this point is, do we need synchronous operations or asynchronous operations? And if there are synchronous operations, what's the chunk size of the operations we are looking at? Could it be possible that we are sending 1,000 requests in 1 second only, or is it like we are sending requests in timely intervals? So these are some of the factors we should consider when we are designing the integration approach. Uh, uh, this we have already discussed. What's the desired operation of the integration? Do we need a synchronous result, or do we need a asynchronous result? The next point is very important, and especially for certain clients which are very dependent upon financial transactions and bank related transactions, which is reconciliation of results. So in certain industries, we must we have some capabilities of comparing, you can say, comparing the results of the two systems after the integration is done on a daily basis. So that might involve some monetary transactions, or that might involve some banking transactions. But the idea is there must be some method where we need to, make sure that the number of requests that were sent throughout the day have all been processed, and none of them have resulted in any error. The last point is security layering of the function. So many times when we are exposing any integration layer, we need to make sure that we protect our integration layer from any external hacks or attacks. So how do we do it? Is by adding security layering on the function, which could be in the form of app ID, app secret, or it could be in the form of AD authentication, those kind of things. So the next point we need to consider is what kind of security layering we need to add on our integration layer when we are actually designing it. Yeah. So considering all those points, now we will look at some of the approaches, and we will explore some of the designs that could be utilized in those approaches. The one criteria that we were discussing is approaches where dynamics is the source. So the next 4-5 slides that we will look at will involve all the integration scenarios where we have dynamics as a source, which basically means that dynamics is initiating those calls to the external applications. Plugins. So some of us are basically from a technical background, and we might have written plugins or events in Dynamics 365. So in plain terms, plugins basically means any event which happened in Dynamics 365. It could be creation of an account, or it could be update of an account that way. And all of those events are also categorized in terms of operation, whether we are doing a create or we are doing an update or delete that way. So what Azure Aware plugins help us is basically they provide us a capability to send a request externally to any web application when such events happen in Dynamics. So what we can do in Azure Aware plugins is we can write custom code which will be fired where every time, let's say, when an account is created or a contact is created, and put the entire transaction in something like a Azure Service Bus. So how it happens is the benefit of doing that is the entire context operation, which consists of the executing user, the entity itself, the attributes, the images, basically everything which defines what was the state of the entity when that operation occurred. It combines everything as one single chunk, which is called as a data context object, and it is then formatted as an XML or a JSON object, and then it is sent to an Azure Service Bus. So the benefit of this approach is that CRM is the initiator in this case, and all these operations are done asynchronously. So we can write these operations or these events to occur in the backend, and whenever any update occurs, it sends the request asynchronously to the service bus. So the benefit of doing that is in certain cases during the integration, we might need to check who was the initiating user, what was the operation which was done by that user, or what was the state of the different attributes which were modified in that particular operation, or what was the images. That could also be a pre-image, or that could also be a post-image of the entire operation which was captured in that operation. So it combines everything in one single JSON or an XML without a need to for us to write any code. We can just serialize that object using one single plugin, which is very simple to write, and just register that. There's no custom code otherwise involved in it, and the complexity is on the consumer side to basically parse that object or the data context object, and format it and consume it the way they want it to. One thing that we need to also think about, there's a very similar approach we can do by Power Automate. So in Power Automate also, Power Automate provides us the connectors of basically sending a request to a service bus. So just how we are writing an Azure Aware plugins, we can always configure any update or a create event happening in let's say in Dynamics using a CDS connector and putting that request in the service bus. So when the request is put in the service bus here, it can be consumed by the external application. So the only difference between an Azure Ever plugin and the Power Automate in this particular scenario is what message we are sending externally. In the Azure Ever plugin, we can send the entire transaction as an XML or a JSON structure, which is consumed by the external application. But when we talk about a Power Automate, we can create the request based upon our rules or our business rules and put the request in the service bus. So both of the things have got their own usage. It depends upon where we want the approach to be used. I see some messages on the chat. Are there questions? Oh, sorry.
No, those are not questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just moving ahead with to the next section, which is webhooks. So webhooks are the lightweight web applications, which are also known by the name Azure Functions, which can be called from Dynamics. So in Dynamics, we know that in plugins we can make calls externally to an HTTP endpoint and and transfer any data or retrieve any data from that service. So in this approach, we are looking at what are the best what are the different scenarios and what are the best practices we can make calls to webhooks or functions. Yeah. So now the first thing that we need to consider when we are designing any integration approach with webhooks is whether we need to make a synchronous call or an asynchronous call. And how we should actually come up with that decision is based upon the volume metrics or the complexity of the operation. If we know that the volume metric of the operation is very huge, then we should try to avoid any asynchronous call because it's better to for an asynchronous call because it can handle the load better. And the second thing, if we are not coming up with a synchronous call, how we could do is we can actually create webhooks which are based upon service bus trigger functions. So with the service bus trigger functions, what happens is from the CRM dynamics, we can put the requests in the service bus, which are then consumed by the external functions. So this diagram basically indicates that. So the source of the information here is dynamics. So in dynamics, we are making we have a CDS connector, which on create or update of any operations using Power Automate, it's sending a request to the service bus. So the point here is instead of this service bus here, it could also have made a call directly to the Azure function on this one. However, the point here is if the volumetrics of the operation which we are looking at is very large, we should try to avoid that approach because it puts too much complexity on the integration layer. Instead, what we could do is we can actually send a request to a service bus and then the service bus can then trigger the Azure function. So this is totally first in first out. Any request which is sent in by the Azure service bus will be picked up by the Azure function and they will execute that in the backend. And any questions on this one before we move ahead?
No.
Okay. So next we have is all the integration approaches where we know where we have Dynamics as a target system and not as a consumer. So when we talk about Dynamics being a target system, we basically mean when external systems are are trying to make calls to Dynamics to update any information or to add any information. So the same things that we used previously, webhooks or service bus, they could potentially be reused in this scenario also. So the first approach that we could use is using webhooks. So again, the main thing that we need to ask ourselves when we are designing the integration layer is whether we need the operation to be synchronous or asynchronous. So if that's a synchronous operation, so the function that we expose will have to immediately make a call to Dynamics and pass on some information also back to the caller system just to make sure that the transaction has occurred successfully. Otherwise, if it's an asynchronous operation, the caller can just put the request in the service bus, which can then be picked up by the Azure function depending upon the load it has got. It's always better to design asynchronous functions because it helps the integration layer better and the performance aspect is always improved there. Yeah. So looking at the integration approaches, so on the left hand side, I've got an external application. So this external application is trying to update any information into Dynamics, which is our target system. So while it is doing that, this is one approach which makes use of asynchronous operations, where the external application sends a request to the service bus here, and this service bus in turn makes a call to the Azure function. Now here we have a very strong concept of durable functions or the orchestrator functions. So people who have experience of writing a Power Automate or logic apps, they will know that we can write different actions or in other words steps in any particular flow or a logic app. So what these steps do is they can actually help us in dividing the complex operation into smaller chunks that can be handled individually. Azure function also provides us that concept using the durable functions. So with durable functions, we can potentially divide the entire complex transaction in the durable function in terms of different actions, which are each classified as one durable functions. So in here, when you see this durable function is basically making call to two actions or two steps, one which is validating the payload, which basically makes sure that the request which is coming from the sender is in the correct format, and validating that request just to make sure, let's say the contact ID is correct, or the it's coming from a genuine sender, the security layer is everything correct. So this validates the payload. And the next operation could be which actually does CRUD operations on Dynamics, which is said to be CRM updates. So while we are designing this layer, there are some things that I would like to explain it here, which are very useful in designing any integration layer. So the first thing is Azure Application Insights. So Azure Application Insights basically help us in maintaining error logs in Azure. We can actually look the error logs and handle them better. So the idea is if any error comes, or any, let's say the operation is timed out, or there's some issue with the payload request, that error is sent to the Azure Application Insights, which can then be read by the caller function, or it can be retried if it's related to timeout. Next we have which is Azure Table Storage. So to improve the performance of our integration layer, we generally do many we generally try to cache things. So when we make a call to CRM REST API, the client secret that we have, its validity is for 2 minutes. So we try to avoid, the best approach is we try to avoid making call or regenerate the client secret if it's still valid, if the validity is, or let's say when it was last generated, it's less than 2 minutes. So that token can be saved in something like an Azure table storage, which can which can be read on every CRM operation, and that can actually help us in reducing the calls we are making to CRM. So this is one table where we can use to save any reference data or anything that we want to cache, be it the client secret, be it the client token, which we are making use while making calls to CRM. The next one is Azure Active Directory. So when we are making calls to CRM, we try to use the REST API. So that's a standard, you can say, the calling mechanism that we try to use right now. So for doing it, we need to maintain the app registration, which is maintained in the AD. So the app ID and app secret we try to create in the Azure AD, which is then used by the operation mix. So these are the main things. However, the main aspect of this integration layer is we should always try to come up with strategies which put less load on the integration layer. If it's asynchronous, we try to ask ourselves why this operation has to be done synchronously. Is there a specific need? Is there a specific requirement for that to happen? And if not, we can always design that using the asynchronous method, which is the service bus. Yeah, this we have already discussed. So this was the synchronous approach that we were also looking at the slide 19, where the calling machine basically needs to make a call to CRM and also get a response back whether the operation has been a success or not. So in this case, the calling machine makes a call to the webhook. The webhook makes a call to the Dynamics 365 CE, and then returns the message in as a success or a failure message in the request itself, which was posted to the webhook. So the main thing in this approach is this entire operation needs to so this entire option is happening synchronously. So from a performance perspective, there are many bunch of if many large number of operations or very large number of bursts which if they are happening on the webhook, it might slow down the integration layer. So these are some things that we should consider when we are basically coming up with operation which requires a synchronous response back. So yeah, so this again explains what we are using in each of the terms. We use the Azure table storage for saving any reference data, for saving the client secret, which is used for making calls to the dynamic CE. We make a call to the webhook using the HTTPS post request, which again could be sending back the response in terms of what's a status code. Could if it's 200, it's successful. Otherwise, it's a failure request. And then we use the application Azure Insights for maintaining any error logs in the system. Uh, yeah, so the next thing that we have is Azure Logic Apps. So what I would like to state here firstly is these things are not separate. When we talk about Power Automate, we talk about Azure Logic Apps, we talk about Azure Functions and plugins. They could be basically, it's not that you have to use only one in your integration approach. It's perfectly possible that that a Power Automate flow is making a call to Azure function. It's perfectly possible that the Azure function is making call to the Azure Logic Apps. So these components you can say that have been provided by Dynamics or the Power Platform are such in a way that they are very flexible. It depends upon what are your what's the integration layer, how you're designing the integration layer, what model fits best for your integration layer, both from a performance standpoint as well as from a costing standpoint also. So these things we need to consider when we are actually when we are actually coming up or zeroing down on one of these components, whether we use the Power Automate, whether we use the webhooks or we use the logic apps. So when we talk about Azure Logic Apps, thing about Azure Logic Apps, they are actually built upon the same workflow designer as that of the Power Automate. So they share the same underlying model. The connectors that are there, we have got ready-made connectors which can help us in connecting to a bunch of different external systems using Azure Logic Apps. And as compared to a Power Automate, we can handle the complex operations in the Logic Apps in a better way. So you can say Logic Apps is one step above Power Automate in terms of the complexity or the connectors it has got. However, the similarity with the Power Automate, it follows the designer first approach. We have the connectors which are kind of shared between the Power Automate and the Logic Apps, and we have the same workflow designer. However, when we talk about something like an Azure Functions or a webhooks, Azure Functions purely follow a code first approach. We don't have a designer first approach in terms of events, in terms of the how we are making calls to the external system, how we are doing retries, how we are managing the exceptions. So all that things is a code first approach in the Azure Functions. However, when we talk about the Logic Apps, we can actually design steps or actions and connectors which can help us in doing those requirements without making use of or without the need of much code there. Yeah. However, the main thing that we that is different between Logic Apps and Azure Functions is Azure Functions we can basically run both in cloud and as well as in our local system. However, Logic Apps are run purely on the cloud. We cannot run them locally if on our system or we are doing just for development purposes. We cannot do that with Logic Apps. And also in terms of pricing, Logic apps purely follow a pay-as-you-go model. So basically what it means is depending upon the operations or depending upon the number of calls or depending upon the number of times the Logic app is being executed, the system automatically scales up and the pricing is calculated based upon that only. However, when we talk about webhooks or the Azure functions, we have different pricing plans that are available for us. So let's say if the operation that we have is a low complexity operation. So Azure Functions, what it does, it provides us a particular plan which has got a fixed resource pool in terms of the memory and the SLAs. So because of this, the pricing is also better in that case. However, with other service plans option, we can always scale up depending upon how many, what are the different, how many requests are we getting for the function or how many times it needs to execute. So we can go for a different service plan also. However, the main point in terms of pricing is if we are looking at, if we know that the integration layer that we need to design, is in low complexity, then Azure Functions could give us a more economical solution as compared to a Logic app. Yeah, so this was the last thing that was there in terms of the different integration approaches. So I'm just wondering if there are any questions that's coming in your mind and you would like
Yes.
to discuss on that.
So there are a few
You can hear
questions.
me?
So, Sagar, your voice is echoing. I will ask it.
Okay, please go
Right.
ahead.
Simran, the question is from Min Rao. Any comments on request limits for this approach to use Power Automate to send message to service bus?
Yeah, in terms of Power Automate, generally, it's like it's an unset, but generally I take like let's say 2,000 requests a day. So it after that becomes 2,000 requests a second. Sorry, after that it becomes slightly complex, and it's better to move externally uh, to let's say a Azure function or a Logic app.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question, Min. If not, please let us know.
You can unmute yourself as well if you want, and if you want to explore your questions, if that is not uh, giving you a correct answer. So that's one thing. Now there is one thing which I had a query, Simranjit. Like, what is the things which we can do with plugins but cannot do with the Azure functions or the Logic apps? There
So
must
the
be some.
plugins that actually help us is like with the Azure Ever plugins we can make a data context without the need to write any code. So let's say if we need any information, which is the user who has initiated the call, or what's the state of the object, or what are the images of the object. So all those things we can actually serialize in a XAML or a JSON object and send it to the service bus. With the Azure plugins, sorry, with the functions, it's tricky that side. So that's one thing which we can do with plugins, which difficult to do with the functions.
Okay, thank you.
It depends upon how you what are it basically comes up what are your requirements while designing the integration layer.
Okay. Fine. And when it comes to a kind of costing, does it counts on the all users calls, or it gets with a per user kind of calls?
When you're talking about the plugins.
Yeah, Azure functions or the logic apps. Whenever I'm calling the as logic apps, so it's given on the organization level or the instance level, or it is given on the user per user. You can have this many logic apps calls, or how?
I'm not sure on that one, but I think it's on the, when we talk about the Azure functions, we just have three service plans there. One is the dedicated service plan, and the other plans which we can scale up depending upon how many requests are being sent to the function. So it calculates on that basis, and logic apps also. But in terms of whether that's a user level or an organization level, I think it depends upon the subscription we have of the Azure, which determines that. But not sure on that one.
Okay. And how easy it is to migrate the things, like we can move and migrate these solutions. How is it is easy to migrate the logic apps or the Azure functions?
So when we talk about migration, we can always comes up with templates. We can make use of PowerShells, which can actually help us in deploying these code. So that's possible with Azure Logic Apps. We cannot use the PowerShell commands, but with functions we can always use them and migrate to different development instances.
Okay, so you mean to say that is a logic app, we have to always go and design it again on another instance.
No. I did not mean that. I think we can always export and then import into the other environment. But what I mean was the how we manage it as a code repository, or in terms of TFS or in DevOps that way.
Okay. Guys, do you have any queries? Please put it in the chat window. So we have still some time.
So I had a query. I will just ask it here. If there is any other pending query, you guys can let me know. So my question is to Simranjit about your comments. I'm not asking for a specific area on how to go about things. Your comments, I had pinned it in the chat window as well. Your comments on how much to use low code versus code components with Azure, and as a solution architect, what you would recommend to your customers who are interestingly seeing low code as the power platform, right? Now, so how will you go and recommend them how to use Azure? Most customers will wish to go low code, right, in this current times.
Low
So
code
your
is
take on that?
always, yeah, low code is always, yeah, I think that's a very good question, Dipesh. Low code is always preferable. Power Automate is always preferable, but it just comes down to the point is whether it's better to whether the operation is very complex, it's making lot of calls and it's quite complex, then it's always beneficial to move the integration layer outside, let's say in Azure or in Logic Apps. But there definitely low code approach, which involves Power Automate and also in some degree Logic Apps, which is built upon a similar workflow designer, is always a preferred approach.
Okay, thanks, Simranjit.
Okay.
We have
Thanks.
any more queries, guys? Or we can say thank you so much for joining, everyone. We really appreciate your presence. We hope that you are taking away some good knowledge or the learnings from this particular session. Thanks a lot, Samranjit, for giving us a hands-on information about the uh, Azure functions. And now, if anything is pending from your side, Simranjit, or we can continue with the next session, or there are certain announcements as well.
Yeah, nothing else is pending from my side. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Vivek. Thanks everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Simranjit. It was a great session.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Simranjit.
So I'll just quickly go and stop the recording. So The quiz is, I think, going very well, and they are enjoying it.